Let's get some expert insight into parental leave with sociologist and family demographer Richard Petz. Richard, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. What countries are leaders? We've listed some that aren't doing it well, but what countries are leaders when it comes to paid family leave, and what does sort of an ideal system look like?
Yeah, so the Nordic countries have sort of set the gold standard for paid leave throughout the world. So Sweden, Norway, Iceland, these kinds of countries. And in terms of an ideal policy, I mean, ideally, there would be a long period of leave for parents. It would be well-paid leave. So ideally, 75% or more of wages, and that there's a particular period of leave that's reserved specifically for fathers to encourage fathers to utilize some paid leave as well.
I mean, the system in the U.S. can be quite confusing. There is some protection under a medical leave for a woman who gives birth, but in general, the U.S. is one of the few nations that doesn't have a federal policy in place specifically for a family paid leave, a shared leave. Why not? And talk about some of the current efforts to enact one and what's standing in the way, who's blocking those efforts?
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. is certainly unique, and I think we're a very individualistic society. And there's not a whole lot of family support, and not just in regard to paid leave, but subsidized childcare, all of these sorts of things. Families sort of have to fend for themselves. And interestingly, support for paid leave is widespread in the U.S. Most Americans want it, but it has become very politicized, and things become very polarized in the U.S. So even though most Americans want it, politicians become very divided about actually passing a leave across partisan lines.
Yeah, no doubt this has impact on families, the leave policies, not just families who are unable to take the leave and how it affects their children, but also I imagine the reverse side is businesses, small businesses who say we can't afford to pay for these kind of leaves. How are these calculations being made, and what are the long-term effects both on small businesses if they have to do it or on families if they don't get it?
Yeah, I mean, from the business side, there's actually a recent study done on small businesses in New York State, which has a paid family leave policy. And small businesses, after having the policy in place, are actually quite supportive of paid family leave as well. So this policy, having widespread access, having it be federally funded, is good for businesses. And we know that access to paid leave increases worker productivity. And we know there's widespread benefits for families, that access to paid family leave improves health of parents, improves parental involvement, improves parental relationship quality. I mean, a whole host of positive outcomes for families. So the lack of public policy is really placing, the country as a whole at a disadvantage.
Even in countries where the leave is generous, it's most often the mothers who take the time off. Here in the U.S., a cabinet secretary, the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, was mocked by prominent Republican television hosts for taking paternity leave. What can be done to encourage men to take advantage of that time to spend with their children at home?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think one is we need to increase access, that there's so much fear about taking leave and such an inability to take leave that leave taking becomes highly stigmatized. So increasing access, I think, will help immensely. I think the second thing that will help is just encouraging fathers to take leave. We recognize that father involvement is important and that fathers want to be more involved with their children. And so recognizing those opportunities, I think, are vitally important to increasing fathers' take-up rates.
Richard Petz, I'm glad you're not on leave right now and that you're able to join us. Thank you for your insight.